Hi, I'm Dan Cortopassi. Today I'm reviewing an HO scale Southern Pacific AC5 class 4882 locomotive from Broadway Limited. My example is decorated in the post-war Southern Pacific steam locomotive scheme without the lines lettering on the tender. Broadway Limited offers these locomotives in several different SP schemes, including a Fantasy SP Daylight scheme. I've seen a lot of comments online about that one. Broadway Limited offers these models with their own Paragon 3 DCC sound decoders installed. The MSRP is $499.99. I got mine for $389.98 from a popular online retailer. We'll start the model at a possible 100 points. The engine comes in a cardboard box. Inside is an operator's manual, exploded view drawings, and some other documentation. Foam inserts surround the model. The engine and tender are wrapped in soft plastic to keep them from snagging on the foam. The engine has to be handled carefully when taking it out of the box. Since this box should protect the model adequately, I'm not taking any points off, but some other models at this price have formed plastic cradles in addition to the foam and wrapping. Also inside the box are a dummy coupler, a wrench for removing the side rods, and spare traction tires. The operator's manual is generic for all Paragon 3 steam locomotives. The exploded view drawings are specific to this model. I did some research and found pictures of the real SP 4114, two from the 1930s and one from 1948. In the 1930s, 4114 looked to be one of those SP cab forwards that lacked any lettering on the tender. At that time, the front of the engine was black with no silver. In the picture from 1948, there is silver on the front of the locomotive below the headlight, but there was black in the triangular areas on the sides. The tender sides look like they might have had lettering in that photo, but it's not clear enough to say for certain. The pilot on the locomotive matches the photos from the 1930s. In the 1948 picture, the engine has a different style of pilot. Also, the round number plate between the cab windows is mounted below the headlight in the 1948 photo, and there is a box on a shelf above the headlight. It's worth noting that in prototype photos, the three circles under the headlight are open in photos from the 1930s. In the photo from 1948, they're plated over as seen on the model. I didn't see any evidence in photos of 4114 or other AC5 class locomotives for the bar above the smokestacks. It appears as if this locomotive's paint and details taken individually are mostly correct, but the overall combination may not be correct for any particular year. Since I don't have enough research material available to be able to speak definitively about the model's accuracy, I'm giving it the benefit of the doubt in this category. The paint on the engine is thin and evenly applied. The markings are crisp and opaque. I only found a few tiny voids over the rivet heads. Even the tiny writing on the builder's plate is legible with magnification. On the sides, the model has a wealth of detail, including freestanding piping, handrails, and ladders. Some of the piping appears to be molded into the boiler, disappointing on a model this expensive. The handrails appear to be made of wire, so they should be durable. The side rods are chemically blackened and look good. I'm a little disappointed by the metallic axle centers. In front, the model has a movable bell made from real brass, and the class lights are not functional. The uncoupling levers and hoses are separate parts. Unfortunately, the grab iron above the pilot is not. To my eye, this is very noticeable, so I'm taking 5 points. The rear of the engine has flexible plastic handrails on the deck. The electrical connection for the tender is under the movable portion of the deck plate. On top, the cab hatch is openable. The dynamo is a separate part and the dome detail looks good. I like the freestanding steam pipe with the whistle. The cab roof can be removed. There's a fair amount of detail inside. The sides of the tender have nice rivet detail. The corner ladders are separate parts, as are the boxes on the sides. As with the locomotive, a couple small details are molded on. At the front of the tender, the ladder grab irons in the center are molded on, which is somewhat disappointing. The corner grabs are freestanding. An electrical plug to connect the tender to the locomotive is under the walkway. The rear of the tender has freestanding ladders, uncoupling levers, and hoses. Up top, the tender has simulated wood decking and very nice hatch detail. The railings on the rear half of the tender are also freestanding and appear to be made of wire. The small grabs near the front of the tender are made of flexible plastic. Down below, the tender has some minimal brake system detail, enough to look good when the model's on the track. The engine has functional knuckle couplers on both ends. The front coupler is low according to the Cady height gauge. The rear coupler is also low. Underneath, the locomotive has traction tires on the first axle of each engine. Both engines pivot to negotiate curves. On most prototype articulated locomotives, the engine near the cab was fixed. Broadway Limited's website says that this locomotive will negotiate a 22-inch radius curve. I haven't tested that. The locomotive picks up current from the powered drive wheels only. Traction tires sometimes interfere with current pickups, so in practice this locomotive should have reliable pickup from 6 wheels on each side, the same as many diesels. On the tender, the axle wipers pick up current from only 2 wheels on each side, which is very disappointing. I've seen other models of the same tender that use all the wheels to pick up current, so I'm taking 5 points. All the wheels are in gauge according to the NMRA standards gauge. On something with this many wheels, that's excellent. The locomotive has no noticeable body wobble. The tender is a bit wobbly. Tightening one of the bolster screws a little should fix this. The engine weighs 28.7 ounces by itself, and the tender weighs 6 ounces. The NMRA recommended weight for a freight car the same length as the tender would be 3.75 ounces. The tender is very free rolling. I measured 6.3 ounces of drawbar pull on my force gauge. For comparison, a typical HO scale diesel usually pulls around 2.5 ounces. The front headlight is activated with the F0 key and is directional. The number boards are not lit. Many other HO scale steam locomotives in this price range have working number boards, so I'm taking 5 points for that. By default, the smoke unit is on and will start working as soon as the locomotive moves. There's a switch under the smoke box to turn it off, and it can also be deactivated with function keys. I'm not a huge fan of smoke units, so I turned mine off for the remainder of the testing. The engine runs very smoothly without any binding and makes very little noise with the sound off. So let's take a look at what we've got. I was disappointed by some of the molded details on a model at this price, so I took 5 points in the paint and detail category. The model had 2 low couplers, the tender electrical pickup is weak, the tender wobbles, and the cab number boards do not light, so I took a total of 25 points in the standards and operation category. That leaves us with a total of 70 out of 100 possible points, which would be a C- on a report card. This is a pretty good model despite having a few issues. I'm giving it a yellow signal. Broadway Limited has done a good job getting the basics right with this engine. It runs really well and is fairly accurate. If you're up to fixing the few minor issues, or if those issues don't bother you, then you'll probably like this engine.